Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? Well, today figured I'd tackle the idea of cantrips in 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. I can't remember the year, but there was a time when in our Dragon magazines, all of a sudden we got this article about cantrips, and these were zero-level wizard spells, and there wasn't really much to them. You could do some things like mend things and make somebody burp or whatever, all this kind of stuff. But it was just the first kind of try by the game to see if they could make wizards more wizardy and make magic users feel more magic. Because if you looked in the books and looked at the literature and then looked at what our characters could do, very often there was a disconnect. It was a little bit different. And it didn't have to be super powerful or anything like that, but a lot of times, wizards or whatever didn't feel very much like wizards. And so I was talking to my friend Jose in Eloy not so long ago, and there's been various things I've talked about on my channel, ways to kind of like have people seem a little bit more magical. Even that, one of my favorites, where if you have a spell remembered, you can cast minor magics depending on remembered, or anyhow. Like if you got fireball, you can maybe make your fingers sprout on fire and light things on fire. The problem is very often people don't remember to do things like that. So Fifth edition has done something a little bit different than my old games, but they've introduced a whole bunch of things as cantrips, and of course other editions have this as well. There are 27 of them in first edition. I counted. About 11 of them are offensive. There's about 3 of them that I would call offensive preparation. Maybe 4 or 5 I think I would call like defensive, and there's about 12 that are utilitarian. The classes that can cast cantrips are bards, clerics, wizards, warlocks, sorcerers. I think I say druids. Yeah, the basic magic-y feeling characters. Some of the other ones that can cast spells like paladins and clerics cannot. And clerics are zero-level spells. They're spells that each class has a list of them, but they don't know them all. Depending on what level you are, you know some, and these are committed to memory, and you can cast these pretty much as you want to, at will. So the whole bunch of them, like I said, are offensive, and they kind of range from touch, which would be shocking grass, to there's one that's like 30 feet, 30-foot range. A bunch of them have 60-foot and 120-foot ranges that you can target somebody, and they do anywhere from 1d4 to 1d12 damage. Most of them do like 1d8 for the most part. And let's see, there's about 3 of them, 4 of them that actually require a saving throw. And so you don't make an attack roll, it requires a saving throw based on your spellcaster DC. And there's, I think, a bunch of them. The rest of them require you to make a ranged or a melee attack. I think there's 2 of them that are melee attacks, and maybe like 5 or so that are ranged. In that case, so you don't hit somebody unless you actually hit their armor class. And these things, range in terms of, like, I think there's Thorn Whip, there's Acid Splash, there's acid damage, there's frost damage, there's poison damage, electricity damage, force damage from Eldritch Blast, a bunch of them that cause fire damage. And so once again, you're able to do that as a spellcaster. And this kind of, I like it. You may not like it, but it does add something to the game where the wizards and the magic using classes, they don't have to use the dart, they don't have to use the staff, they don't have to use all those kind of weapons that they probably kind of suck at, but they're able to do some kind of damage. But it's not like a magic missile where you can just hit somebody automatically. It requires an attack roll, and you may miss or they may save. In terms of what kind of chance you're going to have, well, I took a look really briefly, and let's just say you've really maxed out in your stat. And so you have a +3 at that point. If you're going to try to hit something like an armor class 13, you're going to hit him something like 65% of the time. 12 is like 70, and those seem to be about the armor classes that you're going to meet at first level. Maybe you'll have a 60% chance of hitting somebody with armor class 14. If they're going to try to save versus your spell DC at that point, well, they've got about maybe a 40% chance of doing it. So you get about a 60% chance of it working and them actually taking damage, because it's not save for half, it's save for nothing at that point. And this, of course, is if they don't have any kind of proficiency or anything versus that sort of save. So you're a little bit better off if you're using the spells that don't require a save, that's actually requiring an attack roll. Then again, depending upon the armor class of the creature, that may not be the case. So just something to keep in mind. And let's see, what else can I say about all this? There's some that are like offensive preparation. There's a spell called True Strike, which a variety of classes can use, where pretty much you concentrate for a second, you cast this little cantrip, you're able to figure out some kind of chink in their defense, and the very next attack you have against them, well, you have an advantage. So you don't do anything else that round except kind of look and say, okay, so it's kind of like aiming in a lot of other games. There's, the shillelagh, which used to be a spell, because a lot of these used to be first level spells. And so where the druid can, for I think it's something like, I forget how long, the druid can actually make his staff magical. It does 1d8 damage, and for the duration of the spell, which may be like a minute or whatever, however long it is, they can just cast it again, so it really doesn't matter now, does it? They're able to attack with their spell casting DC or bonus rather than their say strength or dexterity bonus or strength bonus in that case. So if they're not particularly strong, they're really wise. Well, it's good to be them. There's a bunch of defensive ones like the cleric has Spare the Dying, where they can pretty much stop somebody from dying. If they're at 0 hit points, they don't have to make death saving throws anymore. There's one called Resistance, where you cast this on somebody, and the very next saving throw, I think they get to roll a d4 and add that to the result. There's let's see, Guidance, which the very next thing you do, ability check, is going to be have a d4 added to it as well. Something called Blade Ward, which is kind of like the beginning of something like Mage Armor, where you cast this spell, and then for the rest of the turn, it's weird because they say round and turn in the description of the spell at the same time, and they both pretty much mean the same thing. You have resistance to damage from weapons is really what it is. You take half damage from them at that point. There's also something called Guidance. Is it Guidance? No, let's see, not Guidance. Vicious Mockery, that's the one I'm talking about. This one is something where, it's hard to say, is this defensive or offensive? Well, it's kind of both, because it's something that a bard can do, and it's something I want to talk about later on in a different video about psychic damage. But he can do 1d4 psychic damage to you by taunting you with this spell, and also, if it works, if you don't save, you also have attack at disadvantage the next round. So it's kind of a both sort of spell. Then there's 12 spells that are utilitarian. We have like our Dancing Lights and our Light Spell and Mage Hand, which is kind of like Unseen Servant Light, where you can have this little spectral hand and it goes and manipulates things. And I've used this in a game recently. There's the Mending, which used to be, a cantrip, actually. No, I think that was, the Mending was the first level spell. I think it was like a smaller version of that. Message used to be a first level spell. Minor Illusion, which is kind of like Phantasmal Force Light. Friends, which is sort of like Charm Person Light. There's Prestidigitation and Thaumaturgy and Druidcraft, usable by different classes, which kind of produce like various little magic effects, blowing out candles and all kinds of things and creating some sort of like a wizardy thing for a second. And let's see what else. Produce Flame, which is kind of an offensive spell a druid can use, or it's their kind of version of light, where they have this flame in their hand that doesn't actually burn them, and you can see by it. And once again, I kind of put Guidance in here as well, because that's used for ability checks. It's used for, if you want to climb up something. So it's a utilitarian spell. It gives you, I believe it gives you advantage, or maybe it gives you a d4 on that check. I think it's d4. Whatever, I think it's d4. It's not that powerful. So, personally, this is just bias and preference. I kind of like this. It adds some more to the game. It makes the wizards and the other magic using classes more useful more of the time. It makes them more useful in combat, and also what it does is there's a lot of spells that we were used to kind of like wondering, do I really memorize this spell today? Do I memorize something like Unseen Servant just in case I'm in that position where I want to like touch something and not have it go off, or I don't want to like get anywhere near there, but I want to go use something like that. Your Mage Hand does that. Do I want to cast Remember Illusion, or like Phantasmal Force, to just produce a really minor illusion? You can do that. If that's a cantrip you decided to remember. Do I want to have light? Do I remember light? Are we going to go in a hole in the ground or not? I'm not sure if we're going to go in a hole in the ground. So it takes that dilemma away from you and makes these more minor. I remember my reaction to this a few years ago when I heard about that. I was angry about it. I thought, this is terrible. Now there is not a downside, but just something to remember. It definitely changes the feel of the game in some ways. It changes the resource management. If you're like me and you're used to playing mostly old school games and you like the Lamentations of the Flame Princess and the first edition D&D or the BX or BX Essentials. I think it's old school Essentials now, or Astonishing Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea, etc. It's going to feel a little different because very often there was this kind of resource management thing that went on with, what spell am I going to remember? Something like Unseen Servant was a big deal. Having that spell was incredibly powerful when you got to some place where nobody wanted to go in that room or do that thing. And now here I've got something that's got something like a 60-foot range where I can send the spectral hand in there to manipulate some objects. It's not as powerful as Unseen Servant, but it does a lot of the things that I would have done with Unseen Servant. It's, having a light spell, all of a sudden, I can just keep doing that over and over again, which I've done right now with my magic user in Eloy's game. I can cast light, and I don't have to worry about it running out because I can cast it again. I don't have to worry about, maybe I need to remember magic missile. I shot these bolts of flame, whatever it's called, whatever, firebolt at him. I missed sometimes, and sometimes I hit. It was cool. I was able to use Mage Hand in that game to scare the bejesus out of some goblins, having this little spectral, disembodied hand go there and pick some stuff up, and while they're watching that, I just was able to distract them, and so the ranger was able to attack them, I believe, at advantage as well, and cause a whole bunch of ruckus. So it was very, very useful. That's cool, but you just have to remember, especially if you're coming from a background like me, that you're not going to have that sort of resource management thing going on. So that's something that the wizard can just do. It's not this big decision. Do I use my illusion spell here? If you have something like that, well, you get to use that, all the time. So that's just a thing to keep in mind. I personally like it. I think it adds a lot to the game, and makes, what it does is it makes a lot of the other spells more available or more attractive to take, because now I don't have to worry about, I purposely looked at this wizard, and I think what I remember, I think I can remember 3. And so I remembered Mage Hand because I heard that's going to be really, really useful. I remembered Firebolt, and I remembered Light. Maybe I could have 4. I don't think so, though. But I thought those are going to be really, really useful, especially the kind of stuff that we were talking about doing. But it was a big decision then. Do I take Prestidigitation or not? I really kind of wanted to, but Mage Hand seemed to be more useful, and it was, by the way. So at the end of the day, you may like it, you may not like it, but I personally think it's very useful in this game, in this iteration. I don't think it breaks the game because, we were having our wizards do stuff in combat anyway. It makes things like, the cleric a little bit more, they can help out a little bit more. They can kind of, it's sort of like minor bless, where you say, okay, here, this next thing you're going to do, bless you, son, and it adds D40 or your ability check and all that sort of thing. So it kind of, makes those characters feel a little bit more magic, a little bit more divine, whatever it happens to be. And it doesn't have you worrying about, man, do I blow a spell slot on this? So that's how it works. It's pretty simple. I like it. But once again, you just have to be aware that it changes the feel of the game in some ways. Talk to you later. Oh, and yes, I will talk to you about this psychic